Welcome. Welcome, everyone. It's Angelo Robles. And today we have a really incredible program, an actual single family office executive. So we're calling it Single Family Office Teaches Mastering the Virtual, AKA Remote Family Office. So the concept of a virtual family office promises efficiency, agility, and I would argue cost savings. But does it really work? Can a remote first quote unquote family office model match or outperform a traditional family office in leadership? I could even argue investment strategy and really in execution. Some of the topics we'll be covering today with our special guest include the realities of the virtual family office, the tech stack to make it work. I know many of you are interested in that. Performance and leadership in a remote world, hiring and culture in a remote model, bottlenecks, one of my favorite words as a practice management aficionado of family offices. And is that going to be more difficult in a remote family office? And really the future family office, I could argue, including governance as well. So I've been looking forward to this one for a while, and we're really excited to have on a special guest who I've known for about 10 plus years, but haven't seen him even virtually in probably 5 or 6. So it's been a while. Our special guest today is Randy Abeles, CEO of a single family office. Randy, it's been too long. How are you?
Good, Angelo. Good to see you. I'm looking forward to this.
So am I. And more importantly, I think this will be one of the most value added interviews for sure this year, but really looking back through the years, that is most applicable to a family office and the dynamics that are changing in the community. So again, everyone, I'm Angelo Robles, the founder and CEO of SFO Continuity, and of course at Family Office on YouTube and promoting X a little more as well. I am on there also with that great moniker at Family Office. It's not for sale, so no, stop texting me, people, although is everything for sale depending on the right price? You never know. Uh, I will take a little bit of some opposing points of views to Randy, just a little bit. One, to make it a more intriguing discussion. But the reality is, I have been quoted as saying that remote family offices often don't work. And I'm willing to change my mind. I have adapted some of those thoughts in the last 2 or 3 months, but let's get to it. Randy, does the virtual family office, speaking of that subject, actually really work? Or is it a compromised version of a traditional model?
I do believe it does work. I'm living it. I'm living that dream right now. Angelo, in our past life, we always talked about the virtual family office, and there was always a question about is the tech stack there for the family office, which was always one of the biggest challenges. I believe the technology has gotten so much better over the time, and I think the thing people have to remember is a virtual office is not for everyone. You have to have the right players in place in a certain situation. But if it does work, it's great. I believe it's a huge cost savings. But you have to do it in a way in which you keep your people engaged, because obviously the HR part of this and you're keeping your key people is very critical, because some employees do really well being virtual, others don't. So you really have to know your players and really get to know them. So I don't know if that answered your question, Angela, or not.
It does. It shows for some like yourself, you've been able to execute it. And we're going to get into the details of that. Like you said, certain things in outsourcing leadership and tech stacks really, one, you learn more, but the tech stacks have evolved, especially since COVID. Uh, the potential of it is, could you do more with less, better, and faster? If you could, those four things are a powerful, powerful combination. And those of you listening or watching that are not as familiar, make no bones about it. I don't care if it's a deca-billionaire single family office. Doing more with less is a nice way of saying we could be more effective and efficient and save money. It absolutely does matter to families, especially as it gets more scrutinized for the capabilities of the family office than ever before. Randy, what aspects, and again, I hate to come out swinging so hard initially, but you can handle it. What aspects of a traditional single family office cannot be replicated in a virtual model?
A single family office where you actually have an operating business as part of the single family office, I think makes it much more difficult. I'm talking more of with a lot of the families you deal with, Angelo, where they've monetized already. They've had their liquidity event. They're now running the family office for the family, future generations. I'm working with G1 and G2 right now. And when you have more and you have younger people, they love it. They love the technology,
Mhm.
but I really believe if you have an operating business, because so a lot of family offices work out of operating businesses, as right next to it. I don't think that'll work because we have an operating business. People need to be every day, and I think one of the things you mentioned earlier, the having the right people in place are critical because especially for the tech staff, you need a CFO, you need a good technology company, you need to have the right players, but to your point before your question, the savings to the patriarch, the matriarch are huge and they love it. And the other thing is they get better information quicker and faster than they normally would.
Yeah, I mean, that goes, the promise of it is do more with less, better and faster. How often do I see that be in reality? All four of those, very rare, but that's one of the reasons why I'm having you on. The leadership part of it and culture is going to be important. In audience, I promise we will get to naming names and the tech stack and all that. That is coming. But I still have to come out swinging. I'm sorry.
But
Uh,
but but I'd like to give you one example. Like
sure.
my family office is set up where we have a separate investment committee. We meet the first Monday of every month in the afternoon. This morning, I sent out to the whole investment committee our financial results for February 28th, totally complete and balanced. They had them over the weekend. We can turn it around in less than 12 hours. As soon as it closes, we just need a few adjustments from, our custody agent and it's done. I mean, so here we are having an investment committee meeting today on the 3rd of March. They have all the information for February 28th, plus the meetings in the afternoon. They'll also have what what happened in the market to date to the portfolio. I mean, that's the beauty of technology.
Of course. As long as we have electricity, but we could save that one for a different time. What 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 is your take? And it cues up perfectly to our discussion from about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think most of us at least heard of. I enjoyed listening to it like 10 times. Jamie Dinan's kind of a rant. Some thought it was a little fake and a psyop, but let's go with the fact that he really feels that way. And I get it. A bank and a single family office are different entities. He's running hundreds and hundreds of thousands of employees. It's not a perfect analogy, but boy, did he just crush the concept of working from home. Did you have an opinion about that?
I think for what he's talking about, because in my prior life, I was with a big organization with 15,000 employees. Yeah, you need to have people in the office. You need to train people. Esprit de corps, really important. I don't disagree with them. But what we're talking about is a family office, single family office. This will not work with a multiple MFO. It'd be much tougher. But with a single family office, it definitely works. And it depends on how big your staff is. I have a staff of 6. Okay. So it makes it very easy. And one of the keys is I talk to every staff member every day. So we have contact every day so they're not forgotten. The other thing is we meet once or twice a month in person so they're not forgotten. So they feel like they're part of a team, which is very important. You cannot do a virtual family office and not meet with your people and not talk to them. That is a recipe for failure and you will have massive turnover.
Yes, that's great insight. You also beat me to the punch on a couple of questions, but in a
Oh,
good
sorry.
way. So let me put now a positive spin potentially on a virtual family office. The world is your oyster for talent. Now, if you're going to insist they come and meet once a week or once a month, that may fall apart if it's international. But let's go with the premise of it. They may be incredibly talented and have options, and if they want to live in Montana or Wyoming, that's their call. Lord knows I would take Wyoming. But it also opens it up for you to have fluidity and flexibility, to have a remote workforce that is talented. I could argue maybe more cost effective than we're all entrenched in New York City. So that is a tremendous advantage. How have you used that? And among your 6 employees, how many of them are out of state?
4.
Wow.
So I have four people out of state. We actually have, excuse me, we have a family office in New York. The patriarch lives in the Midwest. So part of my job to make it work is I go to the family office at least once a month and I meet with the patriarch once a month. As far as to your other point, my family members who live out of state, they only have to come in once a month. And then I have one person in New York who comes in once a week because they live there and it works out fine for them. So, I mean, we work to everybody. I have another employee who's a mother with kids. She can only come in once a month. It's fine because we went and we sought this person out. So to your other point is I'm able to get the best talent. And by the way, these people are very happy because it fits into their life. And, I have to also make sure that they're working. That's part of when you have this virtual family office, there are checks and balances you can put in place.
Yes, and why don't we dive at least somewhat into that now? And taking up on Jamie Dinan's rant, that maybe to be the bad guy, I'll continue a little bit. You just can't tell me that for the most part, 95% of people working from home are putting in the exact same effort with the same level of scrutiny. Now, we could argue they're going to be happier. They're avoiding commute time. They're professionals. They're big boys and girls. We know what we're doing on hiring, Angelo. Yeah, maybe once in a while we make a mistake. We adapt to it quickly, either move on or make a new hire. But I think by the very nature, how do I know that they're putting in the work, they're putting in the grind? And how do I know that they're not now? I'm saying this to be a real bad guy, and you could say they get the job done, who cares? That they're not doing the work by their pool, that they're not wrapping up at 1 o'clock, that they're not focused on kids running around the house. Aren't those all distractions?
They're possible transactions, they're possible distractions, but the way I look at this, Angelo, is I'm treating my people as professionals. And by the way, I don't expect them to work 9 to 5. Okay, I expect them to put in so many hours a day. Things will come up with kids, doctors, whatever. It's fine. But the other thing is, which they don't know, with my tech company, I have the ability to monitor how much somebody is on their computer, what they're doing in emails. I can see everything they're doing on their screen. So I know how much they're working, what they're getting done. I also give people every week tasks that have to be done during the week. So I can monitor what their productivity is. So to me, the kind of job and being in a family office, my employees aren't 9 to 5 employees. We're on call 24/7.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're available. So if I need to get somebody on Saturday or the patriarch has a question about something on Sunday morning, my people are all available. When they go on vacation, they have to always be responding to emails and be available. So like we close our office down between Christmas and New Year's every year. We give people off, but they get it off based on one, they get certain things done before we close. Two, that they are available and they're monitoring their emails during their vacations. So I mean, so you know what? It's a little give and take. Sure, we're giving them a lot more independence, but I'm asking a little more of them, and they're available 24/7. For that, they're being compensated, I think, very fairly, and they're happy. And you know what? So I think it does work, but you do have to put certain controls. And with technology, you can monitor if somebody's working or not.
And let me ask a question about that. Are they assigned a company quote unquote computer that they must keep strictly business, or could they use a personal computer, but you have a container in it, as I think the industry calls it, that allows you to one track their time while they're logged in from the business side? And I guess a part two, what happens if it's time to move on? They leave on their own accord, they let go, fired, whatever you want to call it. How do you then delete their access to that computer? If you use containers, would you mind naming a brand?
Okay, so we don't use containers. We give everybody a computer, which is registered through our tech company. So we have total control of it. So when somebody leaves, they have to turn their computer in, and if there's a problem, I can swipe a computer. I can wipe it clean. So, because we're very concerned about the information and confidentiality. And the employees also in their employment contracts sign a pretty, as far as if somebody's going to leave, we have some pretty stringent rules on what they can share and that that they really can't share a lot. And when they leave, they can't say a word about the family.
Do you have it in written documents anywhere that they're not allowed to use personal computers for business
Yes,
use?
yes, they can only use our
And
computer, and we give them a phone too. They have to use the phones we give them too.
I was gonna ask you that. And how do you address the issue of Wi-Fi?
Wi-Fi is something we don't do, but my tech company monitors everyone's Wi-Fi. But we have certain protocols for signing in, so double encryption and everything else. So basically, even if their Wi-Fi is weak or subject to, hacking, let's say, for lack of a better term, we can make sure that for them to sign in, we can get rid of the hacking. We have somebody who monitors our systems all the time. And for example, when bad emails come in or we think something, someone's trying to get into the system, we're alerted because of the software we put in. So one of the things I started saying earlier, for this to work, you need a very good tech company that's a partner, and they're not that expensive. Once you get everything set up in place, they're great. So they run a lot of our software and they have all our passwords.
Is that some concern that they may have the keys to the kingdom? What happens if there's a falling out, a breach? Is there a backup person that would be able to, where they don't have access to everything, is basically what I'm saying.
We have a lot of duplication. So we have another company monitoring, but we know these people. We've worked with them for years. But I have another company always available that has our systems in case they go bad or something happens or they go down. So I never lose connectivity, or I
Okay.
haven't up till now.
A related question, so it's a little bit repetitive, but it may has a little different tone to it. What cybersecurity measures do the employees go through, training and updates, as well as maybe the systems, which you somewhat described relative to Wi-Fi monitoring, etc.? It's a big threat.
Everybody goes through a course with our cyber company and they have to pass it. The other thing is we teach people on certain emails you shouldn't open or whatever. We have a company that will actually send them emails, and if they open it, they could be in trouble. So we're always checking to see if they actually paid attention, and they have to pass the course, and they have to go do it every year
Okay,
on
good.
cybersecurity, because cybersecurity for family offices is terrible. One of the things I'll tell you where I see the biggest issue from my prior life is wires through a family office have really been hacked a lot more. We now do everything. We do it through our custodian does all our wires and whatever. So we have no issue, because I don't want any employee doing wires or being able to get hacked, because there's been so much fraud with wires in single family offices.
A related question, but building upon it, since you did bring it up, the advent of AI has created some incredible, talented, bad people that could duplicate your image, your video, and put the words in their mouth that even match your voice. So it's getting harder and harder to detect deepfakes. With something like you mentioned, if I'm in the office, until we get robots that look exactly like us, I have a level of security relative from that perspective, but you're effectively mostly remote. How has your office addressed the fact of the advent of AI has brought on some incredible deep fakes? How do you double and triple verify when maybe whatever, more than $10,000 is flying out the door in a wire or something like that?
So again, nobody does wires out of their computers. They all go through our custodian. So we just send them spreadsheets with them, which are all double encrypted. And if somebody was going to get in, because all our computers are issued and monitored by our tech company, somebody could not get into the computer with the double encryption, at least up until now. This is what my tech company tells me, and we're pretty secure. And we're even going one step further. Even with their cell phones, they now have to have a key, like it's called the one password account, which is amazing, which really gives you security to protect all your passwords. So I mean, the good tech companies, and believe me, there, as you know, Angela, there's a lot of bad ones. There's a lot of good tech companies out there, and the ones, they'll protect your assets, because the family office has to be protected, and because we're protecting all the assets. But remember, besides what I do, I have everything custodianed by a very large, international New York bank that is our custodian for all our assets. So
And in terms of a little bit of practice management, because I do think it's harder in theory when you're remote, I'm assuming you believe in understanding what goals are, that people are assigned goals, And if you follow principles of Peter Drucker and other titans in the world of practice management, and you with your accounting background, probably a little more so, do you have things like key performance indicators, KPIs? Do you have OKRs, objectives and key results? And how do you track the progress using technology like project management to see the progress they're making on those goals?
So everybody does have goals. They sit down, they come up with them. I have to approve them. We do like quarterly check-ins on their goals, and then we do a mid-year and an annual review of every employee in person that goes through all these. As far as their products, I will see the products, or my CFO will see the products that are produced, and they'll be reviewed. The key I think to this is giving somebody a goal and setting the expectations so they know what's expected of them. So when you meet somebody, I'm lucky right now because I think most of my people are at least 2 to 5 year, 10, they've been around. So they've been with us. So we know the people, haven't brought anybody new on in over 2 years. Hopefully I won't have to because we have a really good team. But I think meeting with the people, setting them goals, monitoring the goals, and communication. I can't stress that enough. If you're not communicating with the people in a virtual family office, you're going to have massive turnover. I've talked to other friends of mine who run other family offices. We share best practices, just like in forums like you run, Angelo. And it's very critical that you talk and meet with the people.
Excellent. And I did mention project management. There are software programs, Trello and so many others, probably Asana. A lot of platforms have them now where, and I know some people find this a little overreaching and a little bit of looking over the shoulder, but if I have goals that are assigned, I would like for my talent to update me potentially daily via a digital platform that me and others could look at, potentially including the principal, so I know the progress that is being made on the goal. Now, does every goal need to be monitored every hour and every day? Probably not. Does it have potential to be a little bit heavy-handed? It does. But, and maybe I sound a little anti-people, but I just know that most humans are not the best versions of themselves. They do need a kick in the butt. Maybe I come from an era of Jack Welch, of Bill Parcells in football, where I'm a little old school with that. You may have a different approach that is more beloved by your employees. But again, I go back to, how do you know exactly the progress that they're making? And is there a technological tool like project management that helps you?
So I don't use that tool because I think it's almost too much for what we're doing. A lot of the stuff we do is routine, same stuff every week. And then when we have new projects, I can monitor the new projects. People know what they have to do. But again, my success has always been through my whole career. I treat people as professionals. You're expected to be available certain hours, but I mean, if you got to go do something, go to the doctor, you want to go see an activity with your kids, great. Because you know what? I think that builds better loyalty and builds the esprit de corps within the team. And I'm treating everyone as a professional. And I even have on staff for the kids of one of the patriarchs, we have some, I'll call it nanny or whatever. We also monitor them and treat them, and they have certain rules. So, I mean, it's all different levels of people. Have property managers, So, I mean, it's all different kind of people. They all have different tasks. So that's my job to work with all the people and understand what they're doing and that they're meeting their goals. And the other thing is I try part of their compensation each year, they get a nice bonus if they accomplish all their goals. So they're very motivated by compensation. And, we treat our people very well as far as for benefits, vacations, So, I mean, a lot of people leave like public accounting and other places to go to family offices. Family offices are a lot of work, but some people love them, some don't. And if you're really good at what you do, you can be very successful in a family office because it's a great career path and it's great for somebody's family.
And how do you address an issue that I would call, to me, the big three in the family office in this order? People by far number one. I now put tech number two, somewhat due to AI, which we'll get to a little later. And I put systems number three. But systems are, of course, very important. Randy, what happens if someone leaves on their own accord, gets disabled, goes down, gets fired? And the word I used earlier is they kind of have the keys to the kingdom. How do you have redundancy in standard operating procedures, in systems, in a backup person, including yourself, that is able to step in and do a good enough job until it gets more clear exactly what we need to bring on to replace or make an other internal decision internally?
My top two people can do everybody's job. So they can cover for somebody until we bring somebody on. I wouldn't say everybody's overworked, but certain times of the month are worse than others. But so they have some availability, but we train more than one person in somebody's task. So for example, the CFO, I know everything he does. I know his systems. I know what he does. If God forbid something happened to him, I could step in until I brought a new CFO in. So, I mean, because we're a smaller office, Angela, it's tougher to have as much backup as I'd like, because I'm limited in how many employees I'm going to have. And we're trying to be efficient. So, with the technology, it's very helpful. But listen, whenever you lose a key person, I'm not going to kid you, it hurts. And it's going to cause a little downtime. You got to get up pretty fast, but I don't think we would lose anything. And we also have, an outside accounting firm that can also back us up, and we also have our custodian that can back us up. So we do have backups. If we couldn't use the office, we can go use their services because they know what our systems are and they have all our records.
I promised I would come back to bottlenecks. So I look at talented people, especially in a smaller office where every person really counts. And I look at the distractions that come their way. I look at the fact of maybe a little bit of hand holding and guidance as a leader that I could provide to them. I think one of my main jobs would be, what is holding you back from reaching the optimal of this goal even sooner? You must have some bottlenecks. And how could I help you eliminate those bottlenecks? Do you look at yourself as being a bottleneck remover, a problem solver? And do you have that kind of relationship where you can make that phone call, that inquiry, and help get that problem off their back?
Absolutely. That's part of what I do in talking to everyone every day. I understand what they're doing, any problems, if something's not going right, or if they're having a problem with a custodian or one of our third party vendors, or if there's an issue, let's say, with our accounting software, or if we're having an issue with our outside. We spend a lot of time working with our outside professionals. So, people communicate all the time. Any issues, usually on certain calls, we'll have two team members on a call. So we have backup. So yeah, there are issues, but yes, I would say that's 25% of my job is solving problems and clearing people's plates so they can do their jobs.
And I mean, it seems to be always a sensitive subject when I bring this up. I don't mean to put you in a little bit of a weird spot. It relates to practice management and what I recently said. Elon Musk got in a little bit of heat. I got no idea why, where he requested of the government employees to, by the end of the week, give me 5 things that you did this week. To me, that's like a no brainer. But God forbid, in the world of government, it is so different. A lot of that is remote. A lot of them are not getting the job done. I hate to make this a little personal. And I want to help you. I want to know what you did. What are the goals? What are your bottlenecks? How can I make it better for you? It sounds like you're doing all these things. I'm assuming if you get pushback from an employee on that, you have a bigger problem.
Yeah, I agree. I know what everyone's doing. So, I mean, I could write the list of the 5 things they did in the last week, you know, because I know what they're doing. I assign the task, I know what they're doing, and we have such a good relationship and such good communications. I know everything they have to do, and I have to sign off on almost everything. That's part of my role as my job. So, I mean, it takes, to have a virtual family office, you need a strong CEO, you need a very strong CFO. That is probably the second most critical position. And you need, as you've kept saying, you need a tech stack that works. And I will tell you in the family office world, because I used to do this in my prior life as a consultant, the perfect the tech stack doesn't exist. It still doesn't exist. I think it would take somebody with a lot of money, and I think they could make a lot of money. You still have a lot of family offices. Angela, you and I used to talk about this, that they're still using spreadsheets for their investments. I mean, okay, it used to be like 87%. It's probably down to 60 or 50%. But I
It's
would say,
still, yeah, it's still more than half.
Right.
Yeah,
I would still say more than half the family offices are still using Excel spreadsheets. It's crazy, because the technology is out there. So you have to have a family that wants to, one, the patriarch and matriarch, that they want to actually adopt the technology. Some families don't. And by the way, when you start getting into the younger generations, that's all they want. They want technology and they want everything to be able to use on their iPad or their phone. So so I saying for someone who's going to run a family office or take one over, you need to be up to date on technology. And I think there's a lot of people out there, and Angela, as you and I have talked, the technology has gotten so much better. It's like almost there, and it's and
correct.
and
And
it's not cheap. Technology is not cheap.
now let's talk a little bit, and I'm going to stand up for the young folks here a little bit. I get it. You have a solid team of six. It's an intimate number, no turnover the last 2 years. They're all seasoned professionals. Uh, Great. You got it going smoothly. I could still argue sometimes things need to be shaken up, just like in a sports team, it gets a little too comfortable, but ignore that part of it. If I'm younger and I need hands on, I think I do, experiences, how am I going to get that in a family office if it's either uh, overly remote and maybe there's not really a career track? How do you handle interns and younger employees?
So that's a great question. We have brought interns in to work with the person who goes in the office once a week. We have brought them in just to show them. But I will tell you, having an intern, having a great experience in a remote office is very difficult because they're left on their own. They're learning about Zoom calls, and there's not a lot of one-on-one. So that's a tough issue. That's part of the argument when you talk about Jamie Dimon and some of these other people, and some of the organization I was you can't be remote, because if you're bringing in new people every year, how do you get them as part of the team if they're at home? If you look at the turnover in a lot of the bigger professional companies, turnover during COVID was a disaster, because all these people were brought in remote. You had hundreds of people who never met some of their team. It was all remote, so it was very difficult. Uh, but I do believe that in a smaller family office, it does work. But I will tell you, listen, we've been lucky. We haven't had turnover. If I had turnover, but I will tell you, because I see the resumes that come in, there's a lot of very qualified people out there. There's a lot of people leaving the accounting profession. There's a lot of people leaving family office consulting firms. You know, a lot of this, Angela. How many people have moved to family offices? How many single family offices are there now? I mean, there is a lot of opportunity there. But I think the most important thing you said is, how do I have people and what do I show them? Like, what's their career path? That's my toughest challenge. How do you make a career path, especially when you have a smaller family office? So, that's something we work with. And, some people have desires to just do a certain thing, but other people are looking for more. So I'm training, because of my age, someone who hopefully can walk into my shoes in a few years, which is their opportunity. And then somebody can move up to their position, but it's very tough in a smaller office.
And it's not off track. It relates to what you said in terms of having six people. Uh, I'm going to make the point that with effectiveness in leadership, with the right people, and by the way, hire brilliantly, you practically can't fail. Now, is hiring brilliantly a little harder than maybe what it looks like on the surface? Sure. What I'm basically getting to is you don't need many Spartans to win battles. Could I make the point, partially due to the tech stack being so important and getting so much better? And imagine how good it's going to be in 3 to 5 years, that you're going to start to see smaller, leaner family offices moving forward, possibly even 3 to 6 people for a decabillionaire, partially depending on and not factoring in personal residence employees. Do they have an internal team on credit, on real estate? Because that could all blow it up. You're going to, again, I go back to, could you do more with less, better, and faster? The answer appears to be yes.
Well, absolutely. But you have to remember, I mean, I don't care how much wealth somebody has. If you have the systems in place, if it's 1 billion, if it's 10 billion, it's 15 billion, it doesn't make a difference. If you have somebody who has multiple properties, you bring a property manager on. His job is to run all those properties and work with the CFO. So, I mean, you bring people in for those various tasks. So yes, I mean, can this be done with a 20-person single family office? Absolutely. But you need proper leadership, and then you got to probably put in another level of management when now you're at 20 people. But I think it works. The MFO, I just think it's tougher. But if the MFO is servicing a bunch of SFOs and basically it's leading the services, so basically it's providing like CFO services, investment services, I think it could work too. I think it could work brilliantly. So I'm saying, because listen, I don't care how rich somebody is and how much money they have, they still want to save money. They want to make sure that their efficiency and that they're getting great systems. So I think that's what the virtual family office, I mean, you've talked about the virtual family office 15 years ago, about it's something that people strive for. I think the technology and everything is there now. It can be done.
Yes. Now that also brings up the point. I used to say you needed 500 million to 750 million to have a real family office. But you know what? You adapt, partially due to, I'm going to state, lender versus the IRS, where basically that was to a large part a kind of a more outsourced, quasi remote family office, but more outsourced, which relates a little bit, which we'll get to a quote unquote virtual family office. But if I get tax advantages from knowing how to structure correctly, depending on what my tax obligations are on a variety of different factors and my internal cost of a for-profit entity, of a family office, I'm able to get better tax advantages than I would get as, for lack of a better word, a private investor, coupled with strategic outsourcing, coupled with the advent of much greater technology. Absolutely, you could and sometimes should have a so-called real, mainly a little more remote family office at lesser than the AUMs that I mentioned. Now, of course, I get MFOs on that want to debate me on that. They're wrong, but well, that's a little harsh. It depends on what the family wants, but to assume that family that I described cannot have a single family office and do not get benefits from it, because no one cares about your money more than you do and your internal entities. So if I offend MFOs, I really don't care. At the end of the day, yeah, I am an extreme advocate of an excellent, which is a little rare, but an excellent quote unquote single family office. I got to go back and ask you a tough one, Randy, because everything can't be rosy. What are potentially, so maybe not, potentially the biggest operational risk in a remote virtual family office?
Well, one is your patriarch or matriarch. If they don't know all the people and they don't really know what they do, they ask the question, what are they doing? What am I paying for? So you
Yes,
so so I mean that's a real issue, especially when I have people in 4 different locations. So I try to make sure that the patriarch in my case meets with all the people, knows all the people, and is comfortable with all the people, where he can actually call them if I'm not around or he needs something specific that he knows they do. But I think that's a very big challenge because a lot of people aren't comfortable with people they don't know. So it's a tough issue. And when you go more remote, and as you said earlier, if you go international, it makes it much more tougher. So, I have never worked with a single family office where you had international and domestic and you were able to do virtual. It just was very difficult.
it's very hard. Uh, I could argue setting up a satellite family office for a variety of reasons offshore, Luxembourg, and other locations. But admittingly, it may almost need to be treated as a satellite with its own leadership that has some level of coordination with the primary or US family office. But again, a subject perhaps for a bit of a different time. Uh,
Can I go to one point you mentioned earlier on
yes,
the
please.
on the lenders?
Yes.
Lenders in the family office world obviously has become one of the biggest cases out there. And I'll tell you, for anybody out there listening on this call, if you're setting up a family office, make sure you get a good professional team. That's lawyers and accountants. I'm not going to give you any names, but that understand lenders, because your best chance for success is when you set it up originally. So if you're setting up a family office, setting it up and using all the rules of lenders, you'll get huge tax benefits. And especially if you're setting up a new family office. The other thing Angelo said, I do agree. There are limits on dollars, let's call it AUM size, as you said, Angelo. I think under a certain limit, you shouldn't have a family office. A lot of people like to go to their country club and say, hey, I got a family office. It's not necessarily the end all, because if you only have a few 100 million, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, that's a good thing, but why spend the money on a family office? Because you really don't need it, because there's outside firms that could do that for you.
I would debate that to a degree, which I think is what I hinted at, but I do go back to most family offices, admittingly somewhat qualitative on my part, are really not excellent. But I don't think it's necessarily because they're too small in AUM. They just don't make a decision to be excellent relative to culture, intent, and leadership, and the decisions that they make. And I've had, some debates which were meant to be open debates. They weren't shockers, Jamie McLaughlin and some others. And those of you that disagree with me, bring it on. I'll potentially have you on the show, and that could be, we'll structure that as a debate. But what Randy said is not incorrect and can be, unfortunately, right sometimes. But I am an advocate at lesser amounts in today's world. And I completely agree that the lender case is simply a point in time from 2017, but it does give a framework. And you think that your attorney and accountants are great because, of course, you only make great decisions, everyone. Well, sometimes you don't. You need to have a second and a third set of eyes. You maybe want to know, who that Forbes 50 family is using, who is really dealing with the best of the best. And you have to pay for that because that's high quality. Randy, back in the day, I think I mentioned this before, when I first got into the family office world decades ago, there was a guy in Chicago. Chicago has like all these thought leaders. It still does. It probably pound for pound is like the epicenter of the single family office community. Do you remember, like, he was like a legend. Like, I had families that reached out to me to say,
Right.
please, could you get me an appointment with this guy? Do you remember Steve Thorne?
Sure.
Yeah,
There
like
were,
that
yeah.
guy.
Well, it's
Wow.
funny. It's funny you say that. Even today, I would tell you, I'm not going to say the names. There's probably only 5 law firms I would go to set up a lender structure. And if you're setting up a lender structure, I'm going to tell you, it's not cheap. But the benefits are huge, and the lawyers are more important. And I'm an accountant, so I'm a tax guy, so I'm not, so don't anybody kill me on this. But the lawyers are more important in setting lenders up properly than the tax team, and then obviously the tax team has to know how to work within the lender structure. But I agree, there's probably 5 or 6 law firms that handle most of the lender setups right now.
Completely agree. And although we didn't talk about that practically at all, everyone go back to earlier this year, here in 2025, and you'll see one of those attorneys. The law firm begins with an M, and he's primarily based out of course, Chicago, like where else? Uh, Completely agree with that. The number one person to many families, especially initially, is an incredible, incredible tax attorney. That is like the number one thing that I would have, especially if I had an upcoming liquidity event or the initiation of a family office and setting up onshore and offshore structures and knowing how to do it. And sorry, just because your attorney, who may be a good guy or gal, went to Heckerling in Miami the year before, does not make them an expert. And just studying the book, sometimes it's not black and white. There is nuances, and you want to know what you're doing. And many of you, I think, can make honestly, some better decisions with that. Okay, Randy, they've been dying for me to get to the tech stack. So why don't we get to it? I'll start a little more basic, then we'll move on. Do you even have a customer relationship management program, a CRM that you and the team uses?
No, we don't use a CRM.
Do you use something like it, like Outlook, where you're sharing contacts?
We have Outlook, we're sharing contacts,
Okay.
Microsoft. Yeah. So we share through that, but we do not have a separate CRM software. We don't need it because you know what? It's not like we're consultants where we got to track what everybody's doing or they're out meeting people, whatever. We track all our vendors. We know all the people that have relationships with the family office, but we can do it through our existing software. So you really don't need to get in spend the money on a CRM for a small family office.
I already asked you about project management. You felt it was a little too overbearing. How about there's certain platforms, Sumitas, Trusted Family, and others, where it's effectively private communication portals, selectively with you, the team, and the family, and possibly for uploading a documents? Do you use a separate platform like that?
Yes. We
And
do.
do you find it to be valuable or it's been a little disappointing?
I think it's valuable, but I think the most valuable thing is, like our outside accounting firm has come up with a system where we can transfer documents very easily. They set up, it's actually called, they call it Family Site, but we can transfer all our documents, sensitive legal documents, tax documents. Everything's totally secure. It's so easy where they set up a separate portal for the family office. It works fantastic.
And that does remind me, it gets us off for 1 minute. The tech stack, I'm sorry, I get distracted easy. But how do you know what to keep internal in the family office and what we don't need to be great at? Maybe we can't be great at, therefore, we need to outsource. How do you make those decisions?
We have procedures in place on when we keep documents, and we use the software. It might seem old to people, but it's great. Box, and we track everything in Box. And I mean, we have someone who spends half their time. All the documents are sorted. We can get any document from the family's history. It's great. It's our archives. And so we have certain rules on when things get archived or whatever, and when we start deleting stuff. So no, it works because there is so much stuff and so much information going through a single family office, as a lot of the people on this call I'm sure deal with. You need to have a system where you can sort and you can get something. So if the patriarch calls and says, "Hey, where is this document?" We can get it within 30 seconds.
And back a little bit to my outsourcing question, are there certain services, maybe travel, lifestyle, security, that it doesn't make sense for you to bring in 24/7 internal, you outsource it, but you still have to integrate it with the family office? How do you go about doing that and making that decision?
We have one person who works with the patriarch who's responsible for travel, runs the airplane, certain things like that. They take care of all that and work with our providers that we've been using. So
Excellent.
we have somebody who's responsible for that. And remember, we're only G1 and G2. So, where you have a family office where you might be 3 or 4 generations, I think it's a different story. And you might need a full-time employee who just deals with handling the different matters, like, does somebody need a mortgage, or does somebody need help this, or do they need to book a travel or rent a house or whatever.
Of course. And yes, audience, we're going to get to governance decision making and a little bit of rising gen stuff in 2 seconds. But let's complete a little bit of the tech stack. Probably among the most common in a single family office is aggregation and reporting. Would you mind mentioning the one that you use and why you think they're good?
We use Adapar. Adapar is great. Once you get trained on it, it's very easy to use. It's very quick. And I've looked at a lot of softwares. I think it's one of the best ones out there. And Adapar depends on how many feeds and how many different institutions you're feeding into it. And the other issue that's always out there, so a good family office will always have a certain percentage of their assets allocated to alternatives. Alternatives are much more difficult to account for than cash and investments, which you can get every day, every minute. On the alternatives, it's very tough, and there are new softwares out there that help you with it. But alternatives are still a difficult one, Angelo. There's some new software out there, but it's hard to get timely information on your alternatives because they just don't give you financials.
Of course. And you mentioned cash and cash management. That's become very trendy. There actually is a new platform out there now that kind of scours the world for the best kind of money market and accounts to keep internally at various banks and custodians, especially up to an insured amount, which, depending on the size of the family, may get a little more complex. Since you did mention alternatives, that can mean different things to different people. Do you mean being an LP in a fund, or more complexity to a degree, being a direct and or controlling investor in a private company?
All the above. So, so I mean, there are pieces where we're an LP. There's pieces where we're the controlling interest. There's pieces where we might be on the board, but they're all different, depending. But this is where my family office has an outside great investment committee that sits and guides the family through. And let's be fair. The last 10 years in investments have been great. Families look good. So I mean, it's almost like throwing a dart on a dartboard.
Outside of 2022, which was horrific, that is definitely most true.
You
Although you may
know,
not use it Do you find a brand like Arch, which is different than Archway, everyone? Arch is good if you hold private interest.
Arch is, I think, one of the best ones out there as far as for dealing with limited partnerships, and tracking them the best they can. The problem you have with limited partnerships, some are better. If you deal with someone like a BlackRock, you're going to get better information opposed if you deal with a single partnership or an investment that one of the family members had to invest in. So I mean, it's tough. And, we try to talk to the family about what they're investing in. And, we do our due diligence, or where we'll use our outside advisors to do due diligence. But I mean, to keep control and get good information, it gets tougher on the ones where you don't have a controlling interest and you're an LP.
And one of the audience members, Shauna, you beat me to the punch. She asked, so I'll ask it in her words. Randy, what about GL, meaning general ledger? Any specific preferences?
Sage. We totally are on Sage. It's fantastic. It works terrific with Adapar. It works with our custodians. You have to have a software that works. You need a CFO who's very comfortable with it. We have multiple entities. Sage is fantastic at keeping multiple entities and doing consolidations. So if you have somebody who knows what they're doing, it'll make your life easier. And I think it's a great software. And I am not paid by Sage to say that.
If I could briefly comment, then maybe ask your opinion, Randy. You mentioned in aggregation and reporting Adapar, and you mentioned for GL Sage Intact. Those are effectively probably about the two biggest brands in terms of what they do. I find them to be wonderful companies, sometimes a little complex, a little old school, a little on the expensive side. But again, to a degree, you get what you paid for. But now here's the question. There are lots of new entrants into aggregation reporting and the accounting and general ledger. And some of them that I've looked at have been damn impressive. They're cost effective compared to some of the monsters you noted. And maybe if you're not a 70 entities, a gazillion this or that, $3.9 billion family, the brands you mentioned may be overkill and too expensive relative to how AI has gotten more intuitive, and some of the newer platforms coming up that are built more on an AI foundation and platform are somewhat able to do more with less. Do you feel an obligation, but I know it's a pain in the ass, to potentially look at other platforms as new technologies arise once every year or two?
We do a review every 2 years of our technology stack. The one issue is, so let's say I'll pick Adapar and Sage. They don't always communicate so great. So you have to buy a third software like Knowledger or other softwares out there that help make the link, because there still aren't great links with all these softwares. So what I said earlier is the better mousetrap for family office technology still has not been built. I mean, if I had a lot of money, I would take $5 million. I would go build the perfect stack and you'd make a fortune, because it's still not, no one has built it yet.
There are some entrants and players, maybe I'm going to be a little careful mentioning names, that with the advent of more AI foundational programs are happening that I think are going to start to address some of these issues. A lot of the platforms now are so profitable. They use words like AI, they make some patches, but really at the heart of it, they're not truly AI centered platforms, because that would take a fair amount of money. A company like Adapar, they got the money. A public company, Sage Intact, they got the money. But whether they're desiring to want to move that quickly in that arena is something to kind of be determined. But I'm glad that you do review that every 2 years. Do you have, and again, you don't have to mention names, do you have a specific, and there's about 4 or 5 or 6 that I know, family office tech consultants that you use that every 2 years?
We do it ourselves with our outside consulting firm,
Okay.
which
Uh,
we have an international accounting firm that we use, and they have the expertise, and we use them to help us review that process because they see a lot of the new technology. The other thing that concerns me, not concerns me, just people should be aware of, AI is fantastic, but AI, there's still more security issues with AI because AI is very open platforms. So you just have to know what you're getting and make sure you understand. And especially with the newer entrants, yeah, Angelo, there's new companies coming all the time, but it's just like when I look at an investment, If someone hasn't been around for 5 years, I'm not touching it because, I want to make sure they're okay. And, we owe that to the family to make sure that we're doing our due diligence.
It's a similar question to what I asked earlier on operational risk. So, but it has nuances to it. What is the single biggest mistake as you talk to other families? I think it's going to be communication that you find that virtual family offices make.
They go live too early. They don't have the systems in place. And the most important thing is you have to have the patriarch, your G1s or G2s on board because some of them aren't ready for it. I mean, you're talking about people who grew up with ledgers and ink pens and accounting, and now you're throwing this at them. You have to make sure that they've bought into it because if you put it in, you put it all in place, you spend the money, and then the patriarch or matriarch says, you know what, we don't like this, it's not working for us. So you really got to bring them in the whole process on what you're doing and show them what efficiencies and how they'll be able to get that. It'll help them make better decisions with this information. You have to really keep them in the loop.
And I promised I would come back a little bit to governance, which basically is how we make decisions. I won't bore you with the nuances of how the family internally makes decisions, but more governance from the family office perspective, although maybe some level of conduit through the family as well. Uh, Mission statement, vision statement, constitution, a written document, and mission statement of the family office. Are any of these things important to how your family office is structured?
They're very important, and we even have an outside board of directors that the patriarch sits on, and I answer to them. So I have a board of directors that I report to that includes the patriarch. And we
Now,
do have a mission statement, and it's a very complex structure, but it puts a lot of checks and balances in place. So, I'm not out there just running free.
yes. And again, I think systems are important. I think having a sense of purpose and intent and effectively through governance. I'm a fan of all that. But Randy, I got to be the bad guy once in a while. I could also make the argument, having been in the community for decades, traveled the world, consulted the families, that there are times when they could have too many systems, too many antiquated systems. They play it too safe. They're too careful. There's too many layers between the family, often that aren't a bloodline. And I know I could be a little prickly about that. That annoys people. I'm sorry. But I've seen too many committees, too much of this, too much of that, where it makes the family more fragile because there's too many things in place that kind of become a bureaucratic mess. Where do you think I can be right? And where am I maybe making that worse than it sounds like it really is in reality?
Well, as long as you have like the patriarchs involved in the board. So I just have one level above me, the board. So it's really not that much. It's not that complex, but we do have governments. We do have a mission statement. Yes, you can go way overboard. You can write an HR manual for a single family office that's 400 pages. It's ridiculous. I have an HR manual that's 22 pages. So I'm saying, which we did with our attorneys. So I mean, you have to have the systems in place like you're a big company, but you got to remember you're a single family office serving the family, and your main goal is to make sure that those assets are there for future generations and that the patriarch and matriarch are being taken care of. So you have to understand, if the first thing is, Angela, as you've talked about it a lot in your past, is you got to understand what they want. What are their goals? What are they trying to accomplish? You got to help them. You know, you might be involved with a family that they want to give everything away. Okay, then you got to put the systems in place and the foundations and understand what they want to do. So I mean, if how many times have you heard, if you met one family office, you met one family office, there's no two single family offices alike. I mean, everybody says it, but I got to tell you, it's true. I've consulted with probably 20 or 30 pretty large single family offices. This is the second single family office that I'm actually working with, directly. So I'm saying everyone is different, but the key is you got to get to know what the goals of the family are. And when you have multiple generations, you really have to understand. And I got to tell you something. Again, no one's paying me to say this, but if you have multiple generations, it's key that you get together with the generations at least once a year and do an outside event because it's critical to, team building.
It's critical to team building. And rather bluntly, Randy, And again, we're trying to help out people in the industry as well, especially those of you that are leaders in the family office. And some of it may depend on the age of the patriarch, matriarch, and or AKA deciding principles. How about your job security? This is not the easiest industry to get a job in. And if you're not engaging the rising generation, they don't feel listened to. They don't feel like you're maybe adapting some of your technologies and programs that are going to be accommodating to them. You're basically going to be potentially a little bit out of a job. So we're about to wrap up. Randy, in a second, or maybe a minute, I'm going to ask you some parting comments. But before I do that, I will make some announcements that relate a little bit to Randy and some things upcoming. So first of all, it was incredible to do this interview with Randy, who I've known for many years as a real single family office executives. And trust me, there's no motivation for him to come on. He's not going to be giving his contact info out like most guests at the end of the podcast. He's kind of doing it as a favor to me, which I appreciate, as well as helping those in the single family office community insight into something that tends to be opaque. So one, I appreciate it. Look back to my interview from last week. It's up on my @FamilyOffice now with Katya Fisher. And she basically is a chief legal person inside a family office and also has an entrepreneurial endeavor, but she's the real deal too. So you've gotten some real treats in the last week with Katya, and with Randy, and they also have something else in common. I'm going to be seeing them effectively 3 weeks from today and for a decent part of that week. So I haven't spoken about it too much, a little bit. I'm going to make 1 or 2 announcements about it this week, then that might be it until it's over. So I am hosting effectively the most complex series of events that I've hosted probably since my Tony Robbins event over effectively 3+ days. Only one part of it involved Tony, although it was a multi-hour session. That was a lot of time on stage. That was Santa Monica in 2019. I sold Family Office Association since then. I do have a new private club, SFO Continuity. Go to angelorobles.com and learn more. And I'm doing great. I'm so fortunate to have incredible people around me. So I've done mini programs, probably like 20 of them for my members in the last year, but I'm opening up to a little bit more of a larger scale, or a lot more of a larger scale event in Palm Beach, the week of real Palm Beach, the week of March 24th. And Randy, who you're hearing today, Katya, and other guests I've had like Jordy Fisher and others are going to be a part of my program. You get a chance to interact with them, which, no offense to virtual, it's just better, at least from the perspective of interacting and learning as peers. Now, here's the little bit of the kicker. We are basically all done. I do not need any more sponsor speakers. I have more than enough. And I didn't want a lot of them because the problem with the family office industry is way too many providers and not enough real families. I want to reverse that, which is hard to do unless for the most part you get families to commit and join and pay and be a part of what you're doing. And I've been able to do that, at least to a good degree, Family Office Exchange, and really very few others. Otherwise, you have the reverse model, which is not good in my perspective and opinion. So we're all good. I may do other mid-size events like this throughout the year. And when an opportunity opens up, I may be a little more public about it, and you better move quick. And even as a family, you could be a real family. I am booked. I am overbooked. I am oversubscribed. I do not have room even for friends of mine, with the exception of you join SFO Continuity, my private club. And that is your ticket, and much, much more than that, into this event in Palm Beach, which really is me being there all week and hosting events through Friday, private homes. This is like the most extensive week I've done again in like 6 years. 6 years. And we're doing great. But if you want to learn more, not that I really talk too much about that, even on angelorobles.com, but go to angelorobles.com and join if you're a family or an SFO and be a member. So on that note, Randy, I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks and other incredible family office peers and selective speakers. It's going to be an incredible mix. As we're putting a bow and wrapping up on the virtual remote family office, what maybe did I leave out, or what parting comments would you like to make to the audience?
I just think virtual is something you should look at. As I said at the beginning, it's not for everybody, but I think even some of the things from virtual family office can work in a real family office. Um, but again, it's not one size fits all. So you really need to understand, and I can't stress enough, having the right consultants that know what they're doing and that they work in this area. You don't want to get somebody who's a technology expert, but they don't work in family office. You need somebody who understands family offices, because single family offices are onto their own. They're very specialized, and you need people that understand them. I can't stress that enough. With all your professionals, you need somebody who does it. A lawyer, no. If it's a lawyer that doesn't work with single family offices, no. You need a lawyer that specializes, people that do this for a living. It'll help you and save you tons of time and money. That's
A
my
hundred
comment.
percent. 100% agree. I mean, in my case, like I'm obsessed and I'm crazy about the single family office community, but there really is not a huge number of people that are incredibly talented that are, especially in legal and even in accounting and other areas of service, but those are more nuanced. Like, Randy, you've been great. There were some comments that came up relatively recently for our live audience, primarily members. And thank you. Apparently, a lot of you loved it. And some of you did bring up some other platforms that I've started to become more familiar with. I don't know if you know about Orca, Randy, and there's some others. Like I said, the world is changing, companies are evolving, new companies are forming. Some of them appear to be incredible. Let's see if they're able to be profitable. If they don't make money, then they're not going to sustain because they're not profitable enterprises. But the advent of new competition and AI driving costs down and arguably making it better is going to be good for the buy side for the single family office. So we'll see how this evolves.
Looking forward to seeing it. But you always need to evaluate and keep an eye and go to events like Angelo and other events where you're staying up on what are the new products out there for family offices.
Indeed. And everyone, Randy's been a great guest. Again, really no contact information, nothing to sell on his part. That's Randy Abeles. Very fortunate to have you on, Randy, and look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Everyone, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it. Look forward to the next time. And for some of you in person, Palm Beach, week of March 24th. And no, I won't forget to bring my box of Churchills, beating my cigars. Thank you all. Thanks, Randy.
Thanks, Angelo.